The president has resigned, the state machinery has crumbled, the political order has collapsed. These are the makings of dystopian fiction. For the people of Sri Lanka, it's their reality. All thanks to one family, a dynasty that once striked fear, controlled all strands of power and ruled like the gods of Olympus. Today, they've been driven out of power by the very people who elected them. This is what the week looked like. Government offices were overrun, the state broadcaster was hijacked, the presidential palace was ransacked, the Prime Minister's house was set ablaze. It resembled an episode of Black Mirror, a page straight out of Orwell's 1984. So what's next in this Lankan tragedy? And what will it take to pull this country out of the crisis? Hello and welcome to Gravitas Plus. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Sri Lanka is in a mess. There is no government, no accepted leader, no food and no fuel. Let me show you some numbers. 70% of Sri Lankans are missing a meal every day. 12% of poor households are at crisis level. 4.8 million children are skipping school. More than 3 million people need humanitarian aid and 400,000 Sri Lankans have lost their jobs. The headlines are scary. Doctors are telling people to not fall sick because they don't have medicines. People are ditching cars and bikes for bicycles because they don't have fuel. Hundreds have been caught fleeing to Australia because they don't see a future in Sri Lanka, and can you blame them? On the 7th of July, a court refused a plea to halt the protests. It ordered the police to not disrupt them. The army is being forced to pick a side. A former army chief has joined the protests. He has asked the armed forces to not follow the government's orders and to use their weapons against quote-unquote corrupt politicians, exact words spoken. The situation is going from bad to worse. So two questions here. How did Sri Lanka drive itself into this and how can it come out? Sri Lanka's biggest industries are tourism and agriculture. The Wuhan virus killed tourism. The president ruined agriculture. He banned chemical fertilizers and crop yields fell. So Sri Lanka ran out of money. Forex reserves were depleted. This is an import-dependent country. They get almost everything from outside. It's the only country where I've seen cooking gas, washing machines and refrigerators being sold in duty-free shops at airports. So they were spending more than they earned. The government did not respond with corrective measures. It kept taking unsustainable loans from sharks like China. Earlier this year, it ran out of resources to import oil. There were massive power cuts. That's when the protests began. And the rest, as they say, is history. Their president, who was once called the Terminator, is on the run. Now we come to the second question. What happens next? Sri Lanka's crisis is multi-dimensional. It needs a multi-pronged solution. First, a political solution, a stable government acceptable to all sides. Second, an economic solution, reforms and reducing the debt burden. Third, social stability. And fourth, tackling internal threats like ethnic tensions that could amplify the chaos. That's very much a worry. The starting point has to be a stable government. There's talk of an all-party government in Sri Lanka. It's expected to be formed on the 20th of July. It will be a caretaker government with lawmakers from all political parties. They will elect a president, a consensus candidate. The problem is the numbers are still in favor of Rajapaksa's party, the SLPP. It's the majority party. It controls 114 out of 225 seats in the Sri Lankan parliament. So the next president could be another Rajapaksa nominee. Will he be acceptable to the people? We'll have to wait and see. So far, they've not named anyone. The opposition, though, has declared its pick. Sajith Premadasa. Right now, he's the leader of opposition, the son of Ranasinghe Premadasa, former president of Sri Lanka, basically yet another dynast, but this one enjoys public support. In fact, many wanted him to be prime minister in April, but he refused. 2 months on, he's the front runner for the president's post. Another top candidate is Anura Kumara Dissanayake, a young and fiery politician who's willing to take the mantle. He played an active role in the protest, and now he hopes to be the president of Sri Lanka. What about the Prime Minister's post? Who will take that? Reports say the Speaker of the Parliament will nominate the Prime Minister, someone who's acceptable to all sides. Next question. How long will this interim government rule? The Speaker says until stability is restored. This government will not have the people's mandate, but at this point, it is Sri Lanka's best bet. And I say this for two reasons. One, the parliament cannot be dissolved. According to the constitution, a sitting president can dissolve the house only after he has held office for 2.5 years, which is not the case right now. So there is no constitutional provision to dissolve the parliament. And even if there were, it's an expensive proposition. And that's reason number two, the cost of an election. Sri Lanka's poll panel says a new election will cost $5.7 billion. rupees, Sri Lankan rupees, which is almost $15 million. And Sri Lanka, frankly, does not have that money. So for now, they'll have to trust the interim government to restore order and the economy. And it's going to be a Herculean task. Sri Lanka's economy is in the ICU. External debt stands at $51 billion. Foreign reserves at $25 million. 25 million, that's nothing. Inflation has spiked to 80%. Food prices have risen 60%. Gas cylinders are selling for $16. The currency has slipped to 361 Lankan rupees against the dollar, and $5 billion are needed to secure essential supplies for the next 6 months. So economic recovery will be a long and tough process. The World Bank has suggested 3 steps for Sri Lanka. The first is boosting agricultural productivity. Like I told you, in 2019, Sri Lanka shifted to organic farming. It banned chemical fertilizers. The shift happened overnight and it proved to be disastrous. Domestic rice production fell by 20%. Cash crops like rubber and tea were devastated. To reverse this, the World Bank suggests rolling back the manure policy and investing in fertilizers that are less damaging to the environment. Solution number 2 is diversifying the economy, creating more non-agrarian jobs, investing in non-farming sectors. Apart from agriculture, tourism has been the mainstay of Sri Lanka's economy, their 3rd biggest industry. The Wuhan virus put it on a ventilator. It disrupted the flow of tourists. The government's policies made it worse. It reduced funds for the hospitality sector and redirected the money to unviable projects. The World Bank says reviving tourism can help. The Tourism Ministry has taken note. It plans to hold roadshows in India to attract more tourists. Solution number 3, implement reforms that boost productivity and create jobs. Informal employment is widespread in Sri Lanka. 70% of their workforce is informally employed, meaning 70% of the people do odd jobs, ending up as hawkers or tailors or gardeners. They don't make a lot of money. And this leads to less productivity and more poverty. Sri Lanka needs reforms to change this. And finally, social stability and internal threats. You see, there's a power vacuum that could be exploited by radicals and extremists. Any insensitive step can open up old wounds and flare ethnic tensions. It can also make Sri Lanka vulnerable to external threats. Remember, the Easter bombings happened barely 3 years ago, a series of attacks by the Islamic State in Colombo. They killed 270 people and crippled Sri Lanka's economy. The government has to make sure something like this is not repeated. So what is the world doing to help? Rajapaksa's friend China is conspicuous by its absence. Their embassy told people to not join the protest. India has sent aid worth $3.8 billion. But India is treading cautiously. It wants to respect public sentiment without getting involved in the political mess. Because history has some lessons. The last time India sent forces to help Colombo fight insurgents, it got sucked into Lanka's civil war, and that did not end well. So this time, India is focusing on economic recovery, making sure it keeps the lights on in Sri Lanka. Global bodies are pitching in with bailout packages. But that money will take time to come. Sri Lanka's suffering will continue in the immediate future. I want to end with what this means, what this crisis means for us, for countries, for leaders, for individuals. There are lessons for everyone here. Leaders who treat their country's wealth as their own, who ignore the needs of their people, are doomed. Even the mightiest of them. The Rajapaksas had brute majority in parliament. Look where they are now. The lesson for countries, beware of Chinese investment. And the lesson for individuals, don't spend more than you earn. You'll end up broke. As we wrap this, our thoughts are with the people of Sri Lanka. They've been through hell, and they've shown restraint and civility through most of it.